Okay, so if I've said anything already more times than you need to hear it, I have said that this course is more about the analysis of information than having the information itself. And I want to make sure that you have this resource available to you at the touch of a button, because we're going to use these concepts to analyze the events, individuals, etc., throughout the course. So you're going to continually be asked to explain events in terms of these concepts. All right, first of all, this document, what does it mean to think historically, is in Blackboard under supplementary material. And before I get going any further, I just want to make sure that I emphasize this little thing right here. Right, that indicates a footnote. And what I said here is large amounts of this document were excerpted from Thomas Andrews and Flannery Burke, their January 1st, 2007. Right, so first and foremost, before anything else, I don't have any problem with you using other people's work so long as you give them credit for their contribution to your understanding. Right, makes sense, right? Okay, so then this document is in Blackboard. You can review it whenever you'd like, but I want to emphasize how these ideas are going to play out over the course of the semester. So, what does it mean to think historically? A couple of things here I want to emphasize. First, this document is in Blackboard, so you can find that under supplementary material under student resources, so you have it whenever you need it to look back at. We want to be thinking about the terms here in the way that I'm describing them here. So if you, at the end of the semester, you're trying to do the final exam and you go online and you look up context, you might get a definition that's appropriate but not appropriate for this particular usage, right? So let's think about this specific usage of these terms. The other thing that I want to point out is this thing right here, this superscript. That indicates a footnote. And what it's saying to you is that this document, I excerpted a lot of it from other people's work, and you could go and you could find that information. I think it's good information, and so I've tailored it to our conversation, but a whole lot of it is lifted from their work. As long as I give them credit, this is not a problem. Give people credit, and it's not a problem. Okay? All right, so then to the matter at hand. First term that we want to think about is a three-word term: change over time. Change over time is important because there's a through line to American culture. Things do change over time. Some things stay the same or similar, and some things change. Some things change dramatically, some things change slowly, some things barely change at all. So if we look at an issue like the 2020 social justice protests, right? The racial justice protests, right? There's a through line that dates back all the way to the beginning of, and actually predates the beginning of the United States as a country, right? But it's not the same, right? We don't have slavery today. Women are not excluded from the vote today. So there are things that have changed over time as we think about social justice. Right? So what has changed is going to be an important idea that you want to express when you're analyzing the events over the course of this semester. All these terms are related to each other in one way or another, and so change over time is related to context. Right? So things are different now than they were in, let's say, 1950. So if you go back and you look at 1950 and you look at the social justice environment, it's different than it is today. That doesn't necessarily excuse someone from the 1950s for, let's say, their racist behavior. But what it does do is it helps to understand the environment in which people were making decisions. And so it's easier to judge someone today based on everybody having this very similar experiences, but we have to place ourselves into that context to understand what we are, what people had to deal with when they were making decisions, what was at play. And so one of the things that we'll notice in the 1950s as an example is that the Cold War was really hot, as they say. Threat from the Soviet Union overlaid a whole lot of other decisions. And one of the things that did is it made anti-communism something that was much more mainstream than it might be today. And how did that influence things? Well, it creates a different environment for people to make decisions in. Causality is the third concept that we want to think about, and causality is an important concept, but you have to be very careful with it because causality is not what people think it is. Very few things can be pointed to directly as the cause of the next thing, right? So we certainly do have causality in the case of, let's say, World War II. Americans' involvement was caused by the attack on Pearl Harbor. Right? That is a cause. Now there are many contingent factors to that cause, and one could argue that that the United States would have entered World War II eventually, regardless of Japan attacking the United States, but they did, and that was the direct proximate cause of the United States entering into World War II. Right, Pearl Harbor was bombed. Within days, FDR has a declaration of war from Congress, and the rest is, as they say, history. Contingency is a related concept to causality, but an important one. To argue that history is contingent is to claim that every historical outcome depends on a number of prior conditions, right? So contingency is the conditions that existed before the event took place. So my favorite example to this is it is conditional that you are in a car in order to be in a car accident. Being in a car did not cause the accident, but you couldn't be in a car accident without the precondition that you were in the car in the first place. So then there could be a number of other conditional factors, contingent factors, right? So you might be in a car with somebody who is, spending more time adjusting the music than paying attention to the road. You could be looking at a snowstorm that you're driving in. None of those things necessarily automatically cause the accident, but they are contingent. They are necessary pre-existing conditions that allow for an event to take place. They're contingent factors. So contingency is one of the areas that might be the most difficult, or one of the terms that might be the most difficult for folks to get their head around. But just think about that car accident. You can't get in a car accident without being in a car in the first place. One of the things that contingent events brings up is this idea of complexity. Far too often in our day, we get into this hyper-partisan, us, them, yes, no, black and white, this binary idea that says that you're either this or you're that. The reality of life is that it's far more complex. Right? Complexity emphasizes that history is multi-directional and multifaceted. Right? So there are a lot of things at play. So understanding that taking away one of those things won't necessarily change the outcome, or won't change the outcome in a predictable way, because there are a lot of other factors that are playing into a given event. That doesn't excuse us to say, well, it's complex and we don't think about it. The idea with complexity is we look at the breadth of the factors that play into a particular event. All right, so those concepts are the ones that I'm going to ask you to apply over and over and over again throughout the course of the semester as you're thinking about the events that we discuss. If you have any questions, as always, Hayden at hartford.edu. Talk to you soon.